Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Pow, and today I'm doing week 46 of my 2019 reads. This week I read one book, which was The Book of M by Peng Shepherd. This is sort of a dystopian horror fantasy type novel. It's set in the modern day, but imagines that there is an epidemic which hits worldwide that causes people to lose their memory and lose their memory very, very severely. So within a couple of weeks, they're basically at late stage Alzheimer's. And this causes the entire world to collapse. All infrastructure collapses, and it devolves into one of those scenarios where people are just fighting for survival. So this is a book that I heard recommended by Jade at Bedtime Bookworm and by Tori at Morrow, both of whom I will link below. And I fell in love with the beginning of this book. The atmosphere of the book was right up my alley. It was this sort of slow, contemplative, subdued, almost somber look at the effects of this epidemic, the way that it unfolds. It takes a look at some characters, different points of view, at the way that the epidemic spread and their memories of what happened. And then it looks at them in the present day where the epidemic has spread, society has collapsed, and their efforts to survive. And one of the characters it looks at gets the disease and is losing her memory, and it kind of shows that progression of the disease. So I loved that kind of slow and dread-filled beginning of the book. I love the exploration of how important our memories are and what the effect of losing them is. So I was really, really into the beginning of this book. However, around the, 40% mark, there's a big shift in the way that the story is told. And instead of being this kind of slow and internally looking type of story, it is instead very external, very action-centered. And also the fantastical element of the disease, because it is sort of a magical world and a magical disease, gets more and more fantastical the further you go. And it also becomes, in a sense, a little bit less believable. There's not necessarily a strict inherent internal logic to this magic system, so it becomes hard to suspend disbelief the further you go. Also, that action-centeredness of the second half of the book, it moves from this slow look at survival to suddenly wars and armies and huge battles and monsters and all sorts of action and violence, quite a lot of violence, and that did not work for me so much. So it was kind of like the beginning was slow and focused on internal dealing with the collapse of society and loss of memory. And then the second half was suddenly this fantastical magic with epic battle scenes. And I was not prepared for that switch, and I just did not feel myself sucked into the second half. I finished the book, but the second half really wasn't for me, especially, it was just this violent epic battle thing and not so much for me. Even though I do like epic fantasy, this one didn't necessarily follow some of the rules that I like in terms of building up that fantastical element and the world building, and it just felt a little hodgepodge at times. Also, the ending was, for me, a little predictable and not satisfying. So yeah, overall, I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars because I did really love the beginning. And I'd be interested in seeing what else Peng Shepherd creates, especially if they create something that's a little bit more like the first half of the book. But it's up to your reading tastes. If you're somebody who likes those actiony things as well as the slower things, this book could work for you. So that was the only book that I read this week, which is in general fine, but I do have a lot of reading that I should be doing this month that I haven't touched. I'm doing quite a few ongoing reads. So I've got a buddy read going with Joe from FinalBlowJoe, who I will link below, as well as I'm participating in the Too Old for This Shit book club read of The Way of Thorn and Thunder, which Ashley from Don't Have a Degree in Reading is running. I'll link her below. And those are both taking up a lot of my reading time. So I'm just also not necessarily in the mood for all the things that I plan to read, so my reading's been a little funky. We shall see if next week I'm a little bit more on task in terms of my TBR, but I promise nothing. So we will see how this month goes, and I hope you guys are having a good reading month and maybe making a little bit more progress on your goals.